Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another great edition of #BU Breakdown. I'm your host, Carl. It's good to see you. It's everyone's favorite day of the year, April Fool's Day. It's that day where that one friend from high school copy and paste a long Facebook status trying to trick you about leaving Facebook when in reality you didn't realize that you were friends with them on Facebook to begin with. I don't know about you guys, but I look forward to that every year. Just can't wait. Anyways, I think that it is time for us to hop in and meet our panelists that are going to be joining us this week. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Starting off down there in the bottom, we have our favorite swing from the hit production of Hamilton joining us, Antuan Raimone. that little like queen wave that you're doing. Next up, she's a comedian, she's an actor, she's a writer, and in her spare time, she builds tree houses for underprivileged orangutans. Okay, I don't know if that last one's true, but maybe. We have Christy Hall.
Hi.
Hello. And our last panelist professionally gets made fun of for, just whatever feels right in the moment. We have Ryan.
That's so true.
Honestly, it's very true. Like Jess at every event that I go to with her just kind of like sets herself up for jokes just to be teed off left and right.
My friend Mark Roberts who's a blue man, told me, he gave me words for it because words have power, right? That's the deal with this conversation. Yes. Words have power. He gave me a word for it, and it's called being a shit clown.
What?
Yeah.
Because you're the one who gets all the shit?
Yeah. That you set yourself up for it.
Well,
I like that.
I'm not sorry about it. It's fine.
Next time you're on the show, I'm going to introduce you as our resident shit clown then. That's it. That's what I'm going to do. Our founder and shit clown, Jessica Ryan, everyone.
It sounds about right, honestly.
Guys,
never mind. You got it.
What were you going to say?
I was going to say, how do you move on past that? What do you do next?
You segue. So guys, since it's April Fool's Day, to kind of get us talking a little bit, I thought that I would ask, are you much of a pranker? And if you are, what is the best prank that you've ever pulled? Or the most memorable one?
I'm not really much of a prankster. I don't think I am, at least. But I do remember in high school, for an April Fool's Day, I told a lot of my friends that I was moving.
Like, oh my God, no.
And so that's what I did. I told a lot of my friends in high school that I would be moving and let them get very sad about it before I told them that it was an April Fool's joke.
Oh my gosh, that's super sad.
That was when I was not so much living my #soldier of love life.
Fair enough. Christy, what about you?
I don't do a lot of pranks, mostly either because I'm not good at pulling it off. I'm not a very convincing liar, so I start laughing or feeling really guilty. But I think the most prankish thing I did under one of my high school friends, who was very much a chaos agent, she thought that it would be really funny to put glue in the locks of the school so they'd have a hard time getting in the next morning. And I didn't think it would be that effective, but it was very effective. And I was very concerned because no one could get in, and this was hours. School started at 8 something, and at 8 I think, and people couldn't get into the building until I don't know. It was well after noon, and they were like, "Finally, we can get in the building." And we were like, "Oh, okay." That really worked. All right.
Wow, that's a good one.
I don't think I've ever thought of that. That's great.
That's the only prank I've ever done, and I felt immensely I feel like a weight has been lifted by even telling you about it right now.
I feel like the statute of limitations is got to be over for that.
Oh, yeah. It's It's done now, but oof.
Jess, what about you?
I am same. I'm not like a big prankster, but the one that was pulled on me.
That surprises me.
Really?
Yes, I feel like you would be the one because it would like stir shit. And I feel like you would be the one to like do that at the beginning of like a weekend retreat so that everybody just eases up from there.
Oh, like a strategic prankster?
I feel like you would be one of those.
Yeah, I totally am not. I mean, well, I'm not going to tell that story, but anyway. But here's a good prank that was pulled on me. So Jermaine Blackwell, who's, the digital creative director for Broadway Unlocked, he and I lived together for a really long time. And so we've known each other since we were 15. So he knows me super well. And he knows I love horror movies. Like I love horror movies so much. So one night when we were living together, this was in Washington Heights, I was out pretty late. And I came into our apartment and everybody was in their rooms. It was quiet. And I went into my room and there was just a thigh master like placed on my pillow. And while I think like, who knows what other people would think, my immediate thought was, oh my God, there's a thigh master killer. And like, that's his like little calling card to let me know that I'm about to be thigh mastered to death. And I'm not kidding. That really happened. And I like was super shaken up about it. So I like approached the bed really slowly, picked it up, because I was like, where the fuck did this come from? We don't even own a thigh master. Like, what is this? And then I like kind of went to Jermaine's room and peeked around the corner to see if he was up. Anyway, he fucking put it there. But it really scared the shit out of me.
I love my friend Jessica Ryan. I really do.
That's super funny. So I'm going to tell a story about my best friend, John Parker. Hey, John. Hey. So I met John freshman year of college because we got put in the same dorm room. And we were in like a little suite. So it was like me and my roommate and then John Parker and John's roommate. And then we had like a little kitchen area, bathroom, whatever. And John at this point in time, and still to an extent, but at this point in time was very particular about how he kept everything in his room. And so we would go and like just mess with little things. Like we'd move something on his desk 4 inches because we knew he would notice, things like that. And one day he had a Tempur-Pedic pillow. And so we got this idea that we were like, oh, let's hide his pillow from him because he was very particular about his bed. And we were like, oh, where can we put it that he won't notice? Oh, let's put it in the freezer. And so it was in there for like an hour or two. I don't know. He like got home late after the rest of us. And I'm in my room. And all of a sudden you hear like cabinet slamming. And you hear him like yell like, where is it? And he's like searching through everything. And finally he opens up the freezer and screams and like takes it out, goes back to his bed, and it is rock hard because I didn't realize, but Tempur-Pedic pillows like freeze.
Oh.
And will become like no longer Tempur-Pedic. And so he had to like let it thaw for like 20 minutes. It was really funny. Which just like made the initial prank of hiding the pillow go that much further. Oh, it was gold. It was wonderful.
Ew, you were the college roommates I'm so happy I didn't have.
Well, see, the thing is
that would have made me so upset.
John is that person to give like the biggest reaction, which if he didn't give big reactions, we never would have done it. But since he was the person who would like freak out, it was just like, you just had to like set the one little match and then it would go from there.
Oh no, my response would have been very calm, very quiet, and very slow. You have until I get out of the shower to have my pillow where it needs to be.
That's scary, Antoine.
I'm never pranking Antoine. Never. Terrifying. Well, guys, let's start to hop into this conversation. So this week, we are going to be talking about modern policing in America. So over the past couple weeks, we have seen the Alton Sterling case where no charges were brought against the police that were responsible for Alton Sterling's death, as well as we saw Stephen Clark in Sacramento, who was killed in his backyard. And this is something that's very messy in the sense of, so there's such a strong gut reaction when someone is killed by anyone, and let alone the police who you looked to for protection. And there's always new evidence that comes out later that makes something look one way, and then 2 days later it looks another way, and things are really tough. And this is a conversation now that nationally we've been having for years. And so I really want to start off by just trying to focus on what are solutions that you have seen in your community or in other communities that seem to have worked to start cutting down on this violence, or at the very least, you know, like, what conversations do we need to be having? What do we need to be pushing? Things like that. Antuan, have you, what is a thought that you have? We can just start off there. What's a thought that you have to start trying to cut down on this, like, horrific violence that keeps happening?
I think that a great way to start a conversation is by the public and the police force just acknowledging that, going back to the history of how policing was started, and, you know, thinking back to, let's go back to slavery, because once people were presumed as free as slaves, then there became so many more ways to enforce laws to keep them as slaves, even though they were given their freedoms. And I think that base has existed since then, and there have been adjustments to it or things added on top of it, but we still have that base. So it wasn't as if someone came in and said, okay, let's completely tear down this horrible home that we've built and create a new foundation. It's, okay, we have this rotted foundation and we're just going to add on to it and hope that things get better. Well, if the roots are rotted, the whole tree is going to fall apart. And if we as society can just begin the conversation and saying the roots are rotted and this is how they are rotted, this is why they're rotted, and this is how they have been formed and created, then we can start from there. If people aren't even able to say that, then we can't begin to find other solutions. Because if you are talking with someone that is denying something, you know, for instance, people who deny that the Holocaust did not happen, if you can't accept the Holocaust happened, then you can't even begin to have a conversation beyond that. So we have to have a conversation that this horrible thing exists, and then we can go from there.
Totally. So in that case, let's start there. How, for someone who is, I'm trying to think of this. So I've been listening to this podcast called Armchair Expert that Dax Shepard does. It's really great, and they talk about really real cool stuff. You guys should all go listen to it. But he talks about, like, trying to think of things from other people's perspective. And, you know, he grew up very poor in Detroit. And he was talking about specifically white privilege. And he was like, you know, it's hard to convince someone who's grown up in a trailer on food stamps, like with nothing, that they have privilege for being white. And so I guess my thought is that, how do we have the conversations to tell people that this is happening, who may be in situations where they don't feel personally like there's any difference between them and the person next to them? How do we go about having that conversation to to make people think those things?
I was thinking about this morning, and I think my brain wandered off into a slightly different like problem in this conversation area, which was like, but I just think it'll be an interesting thing to add. I was thinking about a couple of my family members who I know to be extraordinarily kind, thoughtful, compassionate human beings. But one in particular is in the Navy and does something crazy that we can't know about. You know what I mean? He's in intelligence or something like that. And he like just will post, Facebook posts on the other side of this argument. See, the police, this is why they have to do this stuff. It's not specific and it's not attacking, but he has this tendency to really, really stick on what I think is perceived as the right conservative side of this issue, right? With police stuff and some other things. And I was like, how do you have I know I can have conversations with him. You know what I mean? So what is that conversation and why is he like the stick-to-itiveness of this position? And it to me in my brain when I was thinking about it this morning, it's just how do you even dismantle tribalism, right? I think that's what it is like his tribe is police and military, right? And like protecting them at all costs. And because that's his viewpoint, you know what I mean? And I'm sure he feels like you don't even, if you're not in the military or the police, you just don't understand. So I've got to give you my position on it. And I think similar to what Antuan was saying, like how do you start that conversation about rotted roots without letting go of blame so that we can actually just get moving on a solution, I don't know. And maybe this confused the issue, but that was what my thought was this morning on it.
Christy, do you have any thoughts on
I'm
that?
thinking of just ways to start that conversation. And I think whenever Anton was talking about putting the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes, which so many people won't allow themselves to do. I guess, and I don't know what maybe it's just a fear that you'll discover something that you don't like about yourself. But I think that's an important thing that a lot of people just won't do, or they go about it the wrong way. They're like, well, why don't they just, when it comes to even like neighborhoods being policed, they're like, well, they wouldn't be there if they didn't need to be there. Or they wouldn't, if you would just comply when you get pulled over, this wouldn't be happening to you. But it's not always that way. Can you see how it wouldn't be that way if you didn't look the way that you looked? Or, what is it about you that makes you react the way that you do to other races, acknowledging racial biases before you even go into something, I think that would be helpful to start a conversation.
Yeah, I feel like, so we talked last week with Jermaine at one point, talked about you got to clean your own house first. And you got to take care of your stuff before you can start taking care of other people's things. And this is something specific where I got to clean my house. Right. And I feel like a lot of times it takes, I don't know quite how to phrase this. It takes being I don't know, you have to find something that you're like, okay, when you're in this situation, you are worried about the way people perceive you. And, no matter what you do, people look at you this way, this and that. Now imagine if you could die over that, it's hard to find those things, but because as at least for me as a white man, there aren't a lot of situations that I walk into that I am uncomfortable with my skin and with how people will look at me from the second they look at me. And I am aware of that. And so it's hard at times to, I think that's kind of the empathy in this is difficult because I don't have those personal experiences. Right. And so it's hard to find those that really even come close to matching up.
Yeah, I think just even a play-by-play of what you're saying, it's just imagining what this normal everyday situation. I'm getting pulled over for something. The police officer needs me to grab my insurance from my glove box. I'm doing that. I'm going to be fine. But plenty of people have done that and ended up getting shot because they were literally doing exactly what they're supposed to do, which is get your license registration, reach in your pocket, get your wallet. That's where it is. So how is it, understanding that because you look a certain way, there is no fear that something will happen to you versus someone else gets pulled over and they're like, I'm afraid to reach for my wallet, officer, because I now know that if I do that, you might think I have a gun.
And then it's so impossible because then that can be taken as being impertinent. You know what I mean? You're like, well, how the fuck do we do this?
Yeah, you can do everything right, like Philando Castile. You can do everything right by the book and still end up dead.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's nothing, there's nothing that you could have done.
Yeah. And that, I think that absolutely goes back to like what I was saying earlier, is like when we are able to have the conversation of, this is the base we're working from, and it's not perfect. It wasn't perfect then. It's definitely not perfect now. Let's find a way to work from there. But I just feel as if people that are in police service, it's what they've known and it's what's been there. And I'm not pointing a finger or anything. It's like, that's just what it has been. And it's like, oh, well, that's how it always has been. So at what point does someone say, we need to now take steps forward? Like at what point is someone in the position of being able to change the landscape of, police work, say, okay, let's change how we train people. Let's change the mindset. Let's change the culture around.
Oops.
Find solutions in ways to decrease violence or interactions between officers and civilians. I saw a YouTube video a while ago where it was a white man in a restaurant and he was absolutely irate, and the police officers were doing their job trying to de-escalate the situation. And this man kept approaching them and advancing and advancing and advancing. And the police officers kept doing their job and trying to de-escalate. And it was a double-edged sword because I appreciated that they kept trying to find ways to de-escalate the situation. But then part of me was like, if that were a black person, he probably would have been tased or shot or beat up by this point. Like it went on and on and on and on and on. And I just thought, okay, well, that seems like excellent training on that officer's part, or they have a very calm peace of mind to not want to resort to a place where this person's life could be taken. It's like, if that is a training situation, who trained them? How can that training be shared, nationwide? It's finding those nuggets and like, okay, let's take these nuggets and water them and share them with other, precincts.
Right. How can you identify, reward, and distribute those positive, right, actions?
Yeah.
I like that you described it as just doing their job. I think that's the most, I think people have gotten away from like, this is your job. It's community service. You're servicing the community, you're protecting the community, and it's not us versus them. And I think that's the mentality that's been happening, was like, that's what I see at least, or that's what I've seen a lot of times. It's like, it's certain civilians are approached as an us versus them versus I need to do my job and take care of the situation, by certain officers. I think that's a training issue.
Yeah, and there are groups of, sorry, go ahead, Antoine. And there are groups of society that view the police as an enemy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and unfortunately, it's this disgusting cycle. It's circular, but I think even if in some communities, and if we could see, yes, there have been experiences that have not been great between police and minority communities, but it's not the whole,
Right.
I feel like in a lot of ways, and this is like a very large comparison, but I feel like it's in ways like America's version of the Israelis and the Palestinians, like it's this circular problem where like there's so much finger pointing on each side that where can you ever meet, right? Like, it's like, oh, well, the police had to have a us versus them mentality because in the 70s and 80s, they were getting killed left and right. Well, that's because in the 60s, there were vigilante groups that weren't being taken care of by the police. Well, that's because, like, it is one of these things where, like, there's so much that, and like, neither side is inherently wrong. Like, they have their reasons and their feelings because they have been personally affected in one way or another. But it goes back so far, and Antuan, you talking at the beginning, like, it's so deeply rooted, like, especially the judicial system coming out of slavery. It was a way to keep making money off of these incredibly, incredibly poor and disenfranchised people. You put them in a chain gang and have them do this labor that you can't afford to do because you don't have the slaves anymore. Like, it goes back so far that it's a really wild thing to try and tackle.
Yeah, and I think with as much time as there has been between that and now, people think, oh, we've come so far and things have changed. We've come so far because of necessity. Necessity dictates that. Change, time dictates that. However, if you just keep throwing things on top of garbage, you still have garbage at the bottom. You have to clean out the garbage. And until we choose to actually clean out the garbage, then it's just the smell. It's going to linger.
Okay, so obviously there is a cultural issue, right? Obviously there is there's a lot of scary, dirty things that are involved in this. Let's talk about, like, tangible steps to take. And I feel like a lot of these have to do with, like, training and the way that police do their work. Because I feel like a lot of the action is on them initially. Do you guys, do you have thoughts, like, of specific things that, if those things were done differently, could start bringing this down?
I totally have a curveball answer to that, if that's all right.
Great.
Obviously, my week is spent a lot of times thinking about media and content, right? And as you guys have been speaking about all this, all I can keep thinking about is part of the solution has to be the media modeling how we have a conversation about this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so that's the like left turn. Yeah, and it's not, my cousin was recently saying, and it was really a really interesting thought. Like, there is a principled argument for yelling at each other, for getting mad about stuff. Do you know what I mean? But what I specifically was thinking about listening to you guys right now is, like, this conversation is difficult. It is tricky. We all want to be careful and right, and like considerate, or at least thoughtful of other people's positions. And what happens is you get a show like this where there's all these big empty spaces because we're thinking about how we want to say something. Do you know what I mean? And it's not to the end, I think, as some people will say, like, we're sitting here trying to be polite about it. That's not it. We actually have, like, a purposeful intention to be thoughtful and considerate about this conversation we're putting on the air. So, like, a big question for me in solution-based stuff is actually, like, how do you, again, with rewarding, like, how this is, no one would put this on a network. It's terrible TV because, right? There are, like, chasms of silence.
Yes, this is not the way that we get money. This is not the way that people pay for us to do this. Come on.
But, like, the idea is we want more people every Sunday sitting down and having this kind of, like, work through conversation. And I don't really know what the solution is for that, but it's the thing that keeps, like, getting on my brain, because I don't know shit about police, training, but I sure do know about this stuff. And so.
Right. Totally. I think with the news, I've read stories and seen articles where, someone would say, looking at how rising photo of a minority, you find the most eye-pleasing photo of the white person, and then say, oh, well, they are in school and they're blah, 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 blah. We all have made mistakes. The varying levels of those, there are varying levels of those mistakes. But, when the media is choosing And I say choosing because it's just as easy to say, is there another photo? You don't have to be the first. Be accurate. Like what happened to, like, I want a news channel slogan to be, we provide accurate news. Actually, I think CBS Morning News has something similar to that. But for the most part, it's like, you know, fast news. I don't need fucking fast news. There's fast food for that.
Yeah, well, and I've got Twitter.
It's like,
I
give
can
me
go to the bar and hear some fast news. Like that's not yet.
yes,
Well,
give me
'cause, like, at
accurate
this
news.
point-
You
Yeah,
know,
we've got
and-
social media. We've got like the ways to get that stuff quick to realize,
Mhm.
oh, there's a problem. Something's happening. Let's like everybody be paying attention. And then like you guys have the power to wait and hold off until you know what's right.
Yeah. And so it's in that, you know, that's another part of the conversation is since, you know, in a way, the media, be it official news channels, and now we have what we as citizens can provide to the media, but as actual news channels, they still have a responsibility to society because there are people who only get their information from these news channels. And it's just like, it is a very hard conversation to begin.
Yeah, this is like a couple weeks ago, I was headed to work and got there and then got a text from my fiance and she was like, oh, the trains are crazy. Like, did you have a hard time getting to work? And I was like, no, that's weird. So I do what I always do. And I pulled up Twitter and like looked for like search MTA or whatever and realized that there was a car on fire outside of the Time Warner building in New York at 59th Street. And it was actually a police van. And so my fiance, that's her train stop. So I texted her and I was like, something's happening at 59th Street. Be careful, this and that. Turns out it was like nothing malicious. It just something, I don't know what it was, but something happened and the car caught on fire. The important information there was like car on fire, be careful in the area, whatever. And there were people who were saying like a police car exploded, right? Which that becomes sensationalist and that creates issues. Like the important thing is with a lot of these is there was a shooting in this area, something is happening. And then like, let's gather the information as we know it to be true, rather than just trying to put things out as soon as you possibly can.
Right.
So
but that just relies on someone elevating their moral compass above their like job description.
It's the newsroom.
Yeah, it's the newsroom, right?
Which like they almost got canceled like 12 times because they got the lowest ratings. Sorry, spoiler.
I love that show. Yeah, how do you dig back to the beginning and build a more informed society like us? It's not so that we're not relying on media. Like we're again identify, reward, and distribute a behavior set, which is to be educated, put value on like getting a lot of facts and making your own fucking decision about something instead of just regurgitating what you've been fed. Like it seems like that's where this all has to start because nothing is going to ever stop them from putting that news item out or, you know, someone tweeting stuff that's not true because it's our instinct. Maybe.
So outside of like us using our patronage to like watch specific channels or to buy specific newspapers that we believe do these practices, what power do we have as consumers and even like members of the entertainment industry to try and influence this?
That's a good question,
a hard
Carl.
question.
That's a really hard question.
And I realized as I was asking, I was like, that might not be something that like we can come up with in the next like 10 minutes and be able to put into action. But I feel like that's the question, at least when talking about the media, is like what power do we have?
I think calling people out when you see it is like that's like the most we can. That's the most I can think to do is, you know, it's literally calling people on their crap. Like, well, is that a fact? You know, like whenever like someone's presenting you with news that's so sensationalized or whatever it is. Like, is that a fact? Is that true? Do you have various sources confirming this thing? You know, did the car, is it just on fire, or did it explode in a fiery rain of smoke? And like that, like, give me details that are accurate and not what you think I want to hear, so that it will spread the fastest and get your ratings up the most. That's lying.
Wait, I have an idea. So what if, like, for broadcast media and anything else, like in real time, yeah, you're like if you put a news report on, you're about to get the tweet or whatever it is that's like, is this a fact? Are you sure? Prove it right now. Fact check. And then if it's not a fact, like Anonymous can hack it so that you get little like liar icons on your broadcast or something. You know what I mean?
What was that game show?
Instead of little hearts, it's like little L's.
Yes. And fire.
Like
fire. Yes.
Like there was a game show in the 80s or 90s. No whammies, stop.
Oh, press your luck.
Yes, press your luck. Those little gremlins like hop around.
Not a true fact.
Yes.
This is not a bad idea, guys.
Because that would also that would put a little bit of I'm maybe it's because of how my upbringing, but I believe a little shame it makes you very accountable, and it can really rebalance your moral compass. Like if your moral compass, if your true north is not that true, a little shame might put it back on track. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
absolutely.
Let's bring this back for a second. So,
Carl, let us wait.
No, so that's actually a good connection because I'm the host. This is what I have to do. There is a Vox article that we will post here so that you guys can look in it that talks about all kinds of things with policing, but it has a video that talks about body cams and how that has affected policing. And in oh gosh, I can't remember. It's a city in Texas, I believe, or California, one of the two. We'll find out. We'll post it. You can go watch it. But essentially, after instituting body cameras for policemen, the amount of use of force issues that they had dropped drastically. And the amount of civilian complaints they had went from, it wasn't a very large town, but went from like something like 27 to 2 years later, only 3 complaints.
Right.
Yep.
And I think that's what you're speaking to, is that like having that thought in the back of your head of like, someone will know you did this is, I mean, that's how our laws are set up. Like
right.
Why do people not steal from each other? Because they don't want to go to jail and they don't want to deal with everyone thinking that they steal things, not necessarily because they actually think that taking that item from Walmart is bad.
Right. Accountability and the threat of repercussions. And of course, like, because we're artists, our brains are going to go to like the ridiculous versions of repercussions that are creative and fabulously slightly shame-based. No, but you know what I mean? But there's also like, you could literally like make a Google, what if there was a worldwide Google Doc, like crowdsourced brain information for all the ways we could create accountability and repercussion for this issue. Do you know what I mean? Like crowdsourced information all the way from the body cams cited and sourced to like, hey, Anonymous, hack these people's broadcasts and put a liar icon up. I mean, there's so many things.
Whenever you're doing, though, I always get worried with things like this, because there was talk about that, like with the Me Too movement of there were rumors of an article coming out about people in the theater community. The article never came out, and there were talks of people taking it into their own hands and putting those names out there. Right. And this is the thing where like we need good news sources that will vet these things, right? We need someone to do the investigative work to say, okay, I've found corroborating sources that back this up and they say this, because like otherwise something like that, I think what you're saying is just like put out the ideas and talk about solutions, but it could very easily turn into ex-police officer did 100%, this thing,
which is
that
awful.
Could just be slander, right?
My friend Tim says that the internet, I probably shouldn't have named him. Oh well, you don't know.
We
who
don't
he is.
know what Tim.
Yeah, so I know 1,000 Tims, but one of my friends says that like one of the unfortunate byproducts of the internet being able to like gather everybody together and connect them is that it's like the modern version of the Roman mob. It can enable the modern day version of the Roman mob. Which when he said that, I was like, oh wow, yeah, that's so true.
The internet 100% is that, you know, like, and that's something else that we see that is scary with policing, is that something happens and now there is such deep-seated mistrust in the community that the other day I was hanging out with friends and one of them was like, oh, I think there was a police shooting down the street. And my first thought was, oh my God, like, what's this going to turn into? Which is sad that it wasn't, I hope people are okay. I hope that there's safety, you know, like, it immediately turned into, are there going to be protests on our street? Which is because there's such, again, deep-seated mistrust. But one little spark on the internet can like snowball so quickly.
Which again boils down to like the responsibility on us to not just like grab at a passing thing, right? Like to make sure we know what the fuck is going on and the circumstances and the facts. And it's very disheartening because that feels like a really challenging problem to tackle.
Yeah, totally. Well, so I always like to end these little talks with some like actionable things that can be done. And so if you've been listening and you feel like you want to, that this issue really speaks to you and you want to go out there and either volunteer or put your money where your mouth is or all those kinds of things, there's an organization called Campaign Zero, which essentially is trying to help communities and police departments to start fixing these issues. Again, it's called Campaign Zero. And they have, if you're one of those people who's like, I want solutions, I want things, like, I don't want to just talk about it. I'm looking at their webpage right now and they have 10 different things, 10 different sections that they are proposing to help fix police departments and help fix modern policing in the judicial system. So go check out their website. If you think that they are someone that you go see their website and you like the stuff they're doing, I'm sure they need volunteers. I'm sure that they need money if that is something that you're interested in. Guys, thanks so much for joining me this morning.
Thanks, Carl.
It's been a great conversation. These conversations are always really hard, but they're really important. So I'm glad that you guys were willing to get up early and come talk.
Always.
Yes.
Anytime.
Bye. See you later. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being here. While you're still watching, can you make sure to just like subscribe to our YouTube channel and like our Facebook page and share this video with all your friends and comment on the video. Do all the things. We would just be so indebted to you for like, you know, ever. Could you do that? Guys, we'll see you next week. We're gonna do it again. Ah!